accepted and then.
Are we set?
Huh? Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. Hello there. I'm Jane Coates-Eckert. This is my gallery, and I'm glad you're all here. And today is sponsored by the Washington Arts Council, and Michelle Gora is here to kind of tell us a little bit about that. Great organization here in town. So, Michelle?
Well, thank you all for coming. We appreciate that. And thank you to Jane for hosting. It's fantastic. So the Arts Council is a commission of the town made up of volunteers that represent different areas of the arts, performing, visual. And the goal of the Arts Council is to just help promote the arts in our town and to recognize what we have. We're working on a cultural district application with the state so that they will recognize the culture and arts that we already have going on here in our town. And one of the initiatives of the Arts Council is this oral history project. The Gun Memorial Museum has been recording people's stories to record the history of our area, and the Arts Council wanted to make sure that we captured the artists that make this area so special. So this is our first official oral history for the Arts Council, so I thank you all, and I thank both of you for volunteering, because this is a wonderful, wonderful way to get started. So and I'll be here after if you have any questions about the Arts Council and what we do, but I'm going to turn it over to Jane and Erin. So thank you.
Thank you. Hi. So I'm so excited to have a gallery here in Washington Depot. It's the best space I've had in years. Just so you know a little bit about me, I started out in 19th, early 20th century American art. And then in the mid-90s, I moved to Captiva Island in Florida, and I met Bob Rauschenberg, and my life took a turn into more into contemporary art. And at that gallery, we worked with some of the great artists of that period. Christo had a show on Christo, and John Chamberlain, and James Rosenquist, and so it was all very exciting. And but then in 2008, I would always have a summer home up here. I came back up to this area to make this my permanent residency. But in 1999, a very fateful year, my friend Don Gummer, who had a home still has a home up in Salisbury, Connecticut, invited us to lunch one day, and he was giving his wife a painting, and was my husband then, not my husband now, but Henry and I looked at it, and it was by Eric, and it was this wonderful little painting that was very traditional still life with silver and crystal and china in it, and on a beautiful white tablecloth. And then in the middle of the table was a empty white hot dog tray, which didn't fit in at all, and it just made us laugh, and we felt like there was something very special about this artist, and he harkened back some to the 19th, early 20th century artists that we loved, but was doing something very different on it. And just segue, I have to say that one of the great moments of our life was in 2008, before Robert Rauschenberg died. He actually collected Eric's work, and he bought had two of Eric's paintings in his collection, one of a shirt painting and another painting, and then they went to the Rauschenberg Foundation when Rauschenberg passed. So we felt like Rauschenberg had very good taste too. So it's been a pleasure, and so that was in 1999, and Don Gummer said to me, Jane, Eric was selling through a little gallery, in kind of a frame shop gallery in Sharon, Connecticut, and he would do all these beautiful little paintings, and it would sell out all the time. And like Kevin Bacon and all these stars, everybody from that area, came and bought all of his work. But Don said he said go meet him, and they'd both gone to museum school in Boston. He said go meet Eric, and you need to sign this guy up. And so that was great. great praise, and he was exactly right. So, first show on him was in 2000.
Right.
24 years later, so 24th show that we've had on him, and it's been a pleasure to work with him, and it's lasted longer than most marriages do, but here we are. And it's been a great ride. And selling him first in Florida, and now I'm back on his tour. But what I love about Eric too, I mean, Eric is a realist. He does paint from life, and whether he's doing a still life or whether he's outside. And when he would talk about this area, especially Lake Warramog and the surrounding area, I could always see him light up. And he had so many stories to tell from growing up on the lake. And so that brings us here today, to him to tell us some of his stories. And so Eric, your family goes way back on the lake. Tell us about
Right.
the history there.
Well, they go way back, but as you know how this area has changed so much in the last 30 or 40 years, but we kind of started, we were kind of the original interlopers that my great-grandfather bought a property that became the Lakeview Inn, that became the Inn on Lake Warramog, and then everything kind of went from there, which is one of those things where you're either happy or sad about that.
And what year was that?
I think it was in the early 1890s, I think. My grandma was born in 1894, and I know they were up there then. I don't know all the exact dates, and believe me, I'm going to have to refer to this file often for my own stories, which is sad, but that's just the way it is. But yeah, so they had a presence up here for a long time, and actually most of the North Shore Road was owned by some Bonning or Millar, or we have two of them in the audience here, and Edmund. So they remember a lot of this old Lake Warramog tales, and you know, it was really an amazing place.
And your house was a very early house, right?
Right, on Bliss Road, right on the corner. If anybody's been here for a while, it was a beautiful old colonial from 1753. And it's been since raised, and a much bigger, more extensive house has been built in its place. But it was an amazing little spot there because it was, you know, kind of grand house. I didn't really realize when we were growing up how, you know, what a cool place it was. You can take things for granted when you're a kid. But, yeah, so there was cousins and uncles and aunts, and all the way down, almost to the state park. And you know, sadly, I don't think anybody holds any of that land anymore. It's only worth about $1 billion.
Yeah. So okay, so you've told me these great stories, these memories you have on the lake. Tell us a few of them.
Well,
you have to get your cheat sheet out.
There's so many things. I mean, we were just little boys, but I can remember things like we used to take my father's boat to get pizza across the lake. You know, he had a jet boat, and we would go over there and get pizza from a place called Richie's, which later became Docks, and maybe some of you people remember that place. But it was that kind of a quiet, you know, unassuming place that sort of thing seemed perfectly natural. And now maybe, you know, I don't know if you could really do such a thing anymore. The winters on the lake were so incredible in the 60s and 70s before whatever's happening to our environment, but thick ice and ice boat racing and people, the cars out on the lake, and you know, skating on Lake Warramog once when there was black ice, and I don't know if anybody knows, but there had been no snow. So this, you know, this incredible lake surface, absolutely smooth as, and you could see the fish, you could see stones underneath, you know, and it was very, let's see, what else do we have here?
Well, ice fishing.
Ice fishing, diving for plates, like the water was so clear when I was a young kid, you know, my father would throw these tin plates in 20 feet of water, we could see them when we would dive down to get them. And only a few years later, the lake had a huge eutrophication, and it turned, you know, kind of pea green, and now it's been repaired all the way back to, I think it's one of the cleanest lakes in the state. But that that area of the lake off of Bliss Road, Hopkins Inn, all that stuff. There was just so many, you know, family groups and parties. And I remember when I was in nursery school, we had a big party for all the nursery school kids. And this woman came to take pictures. You know, she was one of the mothers from the nursery school. It was Inga Morath, who was quite a famous photographer. And she offered my mother the whole portfolio of photos she'd taken from the nursery school picnic. And my mom said, "Oh, you pick one out." She just didn't bother. And therein goes, that's, you know.
And she was Arthur Miller's wife.
Arthur Miller's wife, and it was just a recurring theme with the Millar Bonning Forstmann group where we would sort of, yeah, whatever. So, let's see, my father had a boat on the lake called the Voodoo. It was a Chris Craft, it was super fast, and actually he swamped it twice. But he also saved this guy who was out of gas in the middle of the lake and brought him back, and his last name was Marks. And a couple of months later, a truck showed up at our house and dumped off an entire truckload of toys for I had 3 brothers, and we're all like, you know, only within 5 years. So, and it was a guy from Mark's Toys who had saved me a little bit. So that was sort of a, you know, a lucky break there, and played with those toys for a long time. I remember getting, one of the things was a doll, because the guy said, you know, you're all boys, but somebody has to understand, you know, it wouldn't exist in the world. So I remember that being a little bit of a thing between my brother and I, who played with the doll. Let's see, Bill Hopkins, who was just a giant, you know, 6'4" farmer, dairy farmer of the old stripe, you know, had been here for probably, the family's been here for 300 years odd. And we used to spend a tremendous amount of time on his beach, and my father and he had a Hobie cat. I don't know if you guys remember what a Hobie cat was. They were like catamarans, but it was brand new at the time. So like we were new on the lake with the Hobie cat, and biking around the lake when I was like 6 or 7 years old. I don't know, parents don't let their kids do that anymore because of milk cartons and all the hyper, you know, safetyism that's going on with parenting, which is, I think, really problematic, because I remember feeling so independent, you know, being allowed to do that. My mother trusted us enough to not get into trouble and to go into New Preston and go to Brussel's, you know, store and buy gum and candy, and of course sneak a look at the Playboy magazines which were there, you know, and he went, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Yeah, Dean, my brother Dean, was my partner in crime for most things, and we used to stage bike accidents on the side of the road because of people coming, you know, the weekend would get incredibly busy. There'd be so much traffic going to the state park and going around the lake, so we thought that if we were able to stage a really convincing accident, there was no question someone was going to stop and offer us money for our hospitalization or our, you know, mental care post-accident. But it never really happened. So later we decided we would start a tomato stand, which was, you know, moderately successful, and, you know, that went to lemonade and, you know, just all the kind of crazy things you think of as a kid, you know, think are going to be absolute winners, and they just aren't.
Were there a lot of people that, or many people that lived on the lake full time back then, or was it? I mean, your family, you did. That were there others, or was it mostly seasonal?
I think that at the time it was largely a seasonal population. Houses got shut up for the entire year, and things got very quiet in the winter months. But yeah, it was. I mean, maybe it's more the same now than it was maybe 10 years after I moved away, because it became a more year-round community, and now I think it's back to being a little more seasonal. I mean, the houses are certainly quite a bit different than they were. You know, the Mulva Hills house on the North Shore, a few things still remain from when I was a kid, but it is really tarted up considerably.
There were how many inns on that lake?
There were 8 friendly inns on Lake Rormac. I challenge anybody in the room. Anybody can do them all? Well, since I wrote them down. There was the Sachem, the Hopkins, Pinnacle Valley, the Boulders, the La Grada Inn, the Lamarwick, the the Birches and the inn on Lake Warmont. And then the casino, which was still there when I was of drinking age, and that was quite a legendary watering hole. We used to hit
And that's
before.
a private home now.
Yeah,
That
I think
burned down.
they're all private homes, except
No, the casino burned down.
well, I know, but the
Hawkins is still
Yeah.
there.
the stonework is still there, isn't that right?
Yeah,
Because they've got the,
Birches burned down.
yeah,
I remember. Yeah.
I know I'm gonna get into some
No,
corrections.
no, there was a paddle boat, it used to be.
Yeah, no, that was at the end, right, the showboat.
I used to take my, oh, yes, yes, that's called the rocks.
Oh,
And I
okay.
used to take my kids for a
That's
ride.
correct.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
that's a,
yeah, it was and that later also for,
What, it's a paddle boat?
yeah, the showboat, somebody set it on fire and pushed that over. Quite a spectacle, as I remember.
Tell your July 4th stories, because those were.
Yeah, so also, it's nice to see so many people from so many different eras in the area, but I'm not sure if they do it anymore, but I remember as a kid, pretty much every landowner on the lake got a case of road flares. And so the entire 8-mile thing would be surrounded by these flares, and they'd all go off at like 10 of 9 just before the fireworks did. And so for about 15 or 20 minutes, the entire lake had this incredible pink cloud. And as a kid, it was just so magical. And looking back on it, it just seems impossible that everybody got together, and it was such a given that that was going to happen.
Still do it.
And they do. That's good. But yeah. So I worked at the Hopkins Inn for many years during the time, and of course they're still doing the flares now. I just heard, but Eric Sloan, if you remember the artist from the area, very famous, and he would do the fireworks every year, and it was pretty good for a long time. But then he got a little long in the tooth, and one year he'd been drinking a little bit, and he set off a satellite. And if you know what satellites are, like these little spinning things, they're not terribly dangerous, like if you use them correctly, when you throw them toward an audience, and one of them takes off, strikes like a beehive hairdo in the crowd, it becomes a much more, a bigger liability. So he asked Eric if I could take over, and funnily enough, I was named after Eric Sloan, but so I took over the fireworks the next year, and my first go around, Franz had gotten these mortars, like big professional style fireworks, and one of the mortar barrels was too short, and I said, Franz, we can't shoot it out of here. It's like shooting a gun with no barrel. It's just gonna. He's like, no, don't you worry about it. You just put it in there and light it off. So I did, and as predicted, the thing went about 4 feet up and shot straight down to the bottom of the lake, set the field on fire. I ran down there, like melted my sneakers. And the funny thing was, the Warren Fire Department was sitting at the top of the hill with a case of beer. And, they were like, nothing's gonna happen here. And so I'm running down there, melting my sneakers, putting out hot spots. And they finally show up at the last minute, and they're like, all right, you got it? And they went back up to the top of the hill and finished their case of beer, and we went on. But the Hopkins, being I had a rich dad who was not terribly good at making you understood what work was, because he did a lot of reading and hanging out, and he was pretty good at smoking cigarettes and mixing scotch. But I worked for Franz Schober up there, and he really taught me like what it was to have a day-to-day thing. It's called work. A lot of people do it; they receive paychecks for it, and I had no idea really what that was all about. But working for him made me realize that like everything you do is a daily struggle. It doesn't really ever end, and the value is in actually the doing, not the having, not the the money, whatever. It was really in what you accomplished as a worker and what you're proud of. And I was taught that by him, which I really think was one of the most important things that ever happened to me, because I don't like scotch. I really don't like to drink that much. So my dad's lessons were not that well taken. But while at Hopkins Inn, and also I'm sure some of you remember, Hopkins Inn was reviewed by Patricia Brooks in the Times, and it it was like the place to go. So I was like, would do valet parking, I was a busboy.
And you're like a teenager at this time,
Yeah, like 17, 18, 19 with a real booming times there, and meeting Dustin Hoffman and Paul Newman, Mick Jagger, Mike Nichols, it just went on and on and on, really some of the
Who's
most.
the one that they?
Richard Widmark, Philip Roth, Claire Bloom, James Cagney, Milos Forman, I mean, it was just incredible. I don't remember half of them, but it was an amazing place to see, you know, all of these people congregate, you know, in one place where you could get a decent hotel butter, you know, it's the only place that really knew what garlic butter was. But,
So you told me a story one time about somebody that got turned away because they didn't recognize.
yeah, that was, Mick Jagger came in one day for lunch, and our maitre d', who shall remain nameless, was a big Journey fan. And if you know Journey, Mick Jagger, they're sort of like on either end of the spectrum. So Mick goes in, sits down at an empty table at the window, and you know, I'm like, and he goes up to the guy, to Mick, and says, "I'm sorry, sir, that table hasn't been set yet. You'll have to wait till we seat you." And so he slammed his thing down, got up, bolted out of the room, peeled out in his Jaguar or Porsche, whatever he had, and yeah, that was the end of Mick for us. And I guess he had, the Stones had been playing in the area, warming up for a concert tour or whatever. But we never let the nameless maitre d' get over that one, because you know, how often do you see that guy? It was incredible. Let's see, where else are we here?
You want me to tee you up on something else?
You're supposed to, Jane. Where are the watermelons? I was like, she's just gonna toss me marshmallows. Otherwise, you're gonna let me ramble for hours.
Well, no, it's good, it's good. So, what I've always, I've taken a lot of photographs and video of you when you're out painting. And I can tell that of all the places that you paint outdoors, when you're around Lake Ormond, it seems like there's something very special to you, something magical. I'm sure it's, you know, because of your childhood and all that. And actually around here, we've got,
That's South Kent. That's not one.
Okay, that's South Kent.
This is 341 and 45 intersection, sort of the gateway from the north to the lake area. I call that the Tannerville, where all the Tanner farms are. This is this here is the Angeline farm, and then we have back there a view from Curtis Road next to the Brooks farm, which I guess is all for sale now. Sad, because there's no way it's going to stay 275 acres. But they all happen to be on my bus route, which was, you know, I would fall asleep and wake up and see, you know, this view or whatever. And one fine day, we were coming down Rabbit Hill Road, and this was in the foreground, and some kid threw up in the back of the bus. But Mrs. Turl, who was our bus driver, and she was like, you know, a classic, you know, foul-mouthed kind of cigarette-smoking bus driver. And but she was sweet as hell, and she said, "You're gonna want to pick your feet up." And I was like, "Why?" She's like, "Because it's coming." Coming down Rabbit Hill Road. And so here comes the contents of this kid's intestines. You know? So I picked my feet up, and she's like, "That sweater, put it on your face. I don't want you puking." That was not so typical, but not completely untypical, you know, bus trip or time in Warren. You know, Warren was, and New Preston and all these towns were so much different. In some ways, they were like a little Appalachia related. You know, I mean, it wasn't quite the swells were here, but in much smaller numbers. And the interesting people tended to be like Jerry, the parachute guy who'd blown his leg out jumping out of a plane in World War II. And he sort of lived in New Preston, and we always saw him as he would walk, and his leg would do this crazy thing. But he would, like, you know, he maintained a great presence in town for a long time. And Charlie Gross was an artist We later found out that his wife did most of the art that he was selling. He has several wives and a whole bunch of children. And, you know, I don't wanna, you know, I can't down talk any of these families, but there were characters, and it was really interesting to see that, you know, one of the things you miss the most about a town are what you would call regulars, you know, the people who really are the fabric. You know, and the people that come in and out and enjoy the town for its beauty and everything like that, they don't quite have that panache that the people who endure winters, which is really, that was part of the biggest problem up here, was like, you know, getting through winter with $1 in your pocket, because everything was basically shut down. But, yeah, so New Preston was, where else are we going, Jane? Come on. What guidance? See, she's like, we don't have to rehearse this, it's easy, you'll just talk.
Well, but I think you can tell just by,